Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. They offer free checking with industry-leading mobile banking. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. Good morning, Hokie Nation. Happy Thursday. We got a great spirited podcast on deck for you. Virginia Tech and Wake Forest, an ACC clash inside Lane Stadium coming up on Saturday at 3:30. We got the whole football crew in-house, and we're going to tell you everything that you need to know ahead of the Hokies and the Demon Deacs on Saturday. It's episode 319 of the Tech Sideline podcast, and it starts right now. We record on Thursday, October 12th, 2023 from our high-tech studios at the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And do us a favor, refer a friend to the show as well. Well, let's go ahead and introduce our football crew on set today. It's the same fellas as always. Chris Coleman to my right. Across the way, it's senior staff writer Andy Bitter. In the fourth chair, of course, David Cunningham, our managing editor. Behind the scenes, Jack Brizendine is producing, and I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. This episode, though, is also brought to you by Alumni Hall, which is the place to gear up for Hokies games. Located on 1st and Main in the shopping center here in Blacksburg, they've been serving Hokie fans for 15 years. Order your Hokies gear online at alumnihall.com. Well, gentlemen, it's kind of that time of year. It's going to be what they call spooky season. We're getting towards the middle portion of October. It's chilly out. This is football weather, and looking forward to another good one on Saturday.
This is, you look at the trees around Blacksburg, they start to turn maroon and orange. Seems like kind of fitting for this campus that's like that.
Yeah, and apparently we get some great fall weather this weekend for the game, is what they say. Nice and rainy.
With a chance of rain.
Yes.
Yeah. Hopefully not. I've had a fill of rain at Lane State. That Purdue game was enough rain for 10 years.
Yes, it was.
So no more.
That was the great flood. I actually have to miss the game this weekend for it'll be the first home game I haven't been in town for since 2005 because I have to go to a wedding. The wedding's in Charleston, and I was looking up the weather there, and it's like 81. I can deal with that. If I have to miss a game.
What kind of friends do you have getting married in the fall on a fall football weekend? What is that?
I would have agreed with you in the past, but when Tech started 1-3, I texted him. I'm like, I think I might be thankful that you're having a fall wedding at this point.
Well, Andy, you brought up the leaves turning maroon and orange in the fall. Blacksburg, obviously a very beautiful place this time of year, and brings up that Lee Corso line. I don't know what a Hokie is, but God is definitely one of them when the leaves are turning maroon and orange. So let's go ahead and talk about the Demon Deacons coming in town again at 3:30 kickoff on Saturday inside Lane Stadium. Wake Forest 3-2 on the year, 0-2 in conference play. Unconvincing wins, you could say, over Elon, Vanderbilt, and on the road at Old Dominion. Their losses, both in conference play to Georgia Tech, and then last week it was on the road in Death Valley, a slim loss, 17-12, the final score between the Demon Deacs and Clemson. 11th ranked scoring offense in the ACC, 8th in scoring defense, 10th in total offense, 8th in yards given up, 9th best rushing attack, 9th best passing offense in the league. So kind of that towards the bottom portion of the conference, pretty much all across the board. Chris, I ask you this, immediate reaction when you look at on paper what Wake Forest brings to the table.
I actually think they're better than last year at every position. Not maybe not at every position, but overall they're better than last year except quarterback, where there's a massive drop-off, and that makes all the difference in the world.
It's almost like losing the all-time ACC leader in yards and touchdowns is significant.
Yeah, imagine that. Yeah, and I think he's shown at Notre Dame that he can play in multiple systems. And Mitch Griffiths is a Northern Virginia guy, a little bit undersized, about 5'11", 190. Struggled in the passing game. He doesn't have Hartman's arm. Hartman could really push the ball down the field and complete those deep balls, and it really, that combined with the slow mesh, really stressed defenses, and they don't have anybody that can stress defenses at the quarterback position this year. He's a solid enough runner. You can't tell it from his rushing stats because they've been sacked 22 times already, and that's a big issue. I don't know if that's offensive line or if that's him. but he averages about 5 yards a carry. Other than that, good running attack, I think, but lack of a passing game is a big concern for them. But Virginia Tech has already lost to 2 teams this year who couldn't throw the football. So for the Hokies, it's all about stopping that run this week.
Well, I want to ask you guys this. For those that don't know, Dave Clawson, he runs the slow mesh system. What is that? What can fans be on the lookout for those that might not be as educated?
Well, it's like an RPO, and it develops very, very slowly, and the quarterback will keep the ball in the running back's gut for a long, long time. While he's reading the defense, he's got his head up looking at the linebackers and safeties, seeing whether they're committing to the run or seeing whether they're coming up or dropping back to defend the pass, and that decides whether he hands it off to the running back or whether he throws it. As a result, the running backs aren't involved in the passing game very much. It's mostly a wide receiver and tight end type offense, but it stresses your linebackers with their decision making, or at least it can. It would be great if the defensive line can go out there and dominate and take some pressure off of the linebackers. That's what happened when Tech beat Wake Forest in 2019. The defensive line for Tech just really dominated. But this defensive line hasn't shown to be the type of defensive line that, particularly on the interior defensive tackles, that gets tackles for loss and is disruptive and things like that. They're a pretty solid group overall. They've played better recently than they were earlier in the year. But you'd like to see some tackles for loss from them and be a little more disruptive to take some pressure off those linebackers.
The slow mesh, it almost looks like they're slow dancing. For a second, they're just holding the ball together, and sometimes they both kind of run up in the pocket, and the quarterback almost runs with the running back sometimes when he follows him through the hole. It's really bizarre to watch. I think you look at the team that Wake Forest has historically had the most trouble with is Clemson. And Clemson's defensive line has always just blown that play up. They just attack the slow mesh. They just hit both guys. And now you have a defensive line in Clemson that has NFL guys all over the place. A little bit easier to do that than take that attack. But I think ideally that is how you would attack this thing, is just have tremendous defensive line play. They're getting in their penetration, and that sort of blows this whole thing up. But like you said, we'll see if the Hokies have the guys to be able to go out there and carry out that game plan.
Well, Wake Forest seems to be kind of doing what Virginia Tech has done, kind of realizing, okay, these are the strengths of the quarterback. Let's play to them, running the football a little bit more last couple of weeks, especially with the man under center.
Yeah, I think they need to run it more. I think that's the strength of their offense. Their offensive line's pretty solid. They've got 2 good running backs from the state of Virginia. Justice Ellison is their backup, but he was like 3rd team All-ACC last year. He's a good back. He's had a 100-yard game this year. Sophomore Damon Claiborne was a 4-star recruit coming out of Virginia a couple of years ago, and he's had a 100-yard game so far. Even their 3rd-string running back, I believe, is Tate Carney, and even he's had a 100-yard rushing game this year, although he doesn't play very much. So they've got 3 capable guys back there who can run the football, and Griffiths is a pretty good runner too when he's not getting sacked. Like, he's not dynamic, but he can help you in the running game. So I think if you're Clawson, you've got to run your offense for sure, and ask the quarterback to make the reads in the RPO, but there does need to be a heavier focus on the run. Really test those Virginia Tech linebackers against the slow mesh, and I'll be interested to see what Tech's strategy is against the slow mesh. Like, the linebackers have had so much trouble with their reads and run fits this year that I wonder if you don't just if you start blitzing them more and take away those reads. It's like, there's your gap. You just blitz into the gap. Don't worry too much about reads. I think anything you could do to make things a little more simple for those guys would help. But the safeties will be stressed as well, and obviously that's an issue for Tech right now with Stroman being out with targeting and Nasir Peoples still not being 100%, although he will play. I expect they'll move Delane to safety this week and start Canteen at corner. I would think that would be their only option, but starting Delane there would make me feel better. Like, if it were me, let's say Peoples wasn't 100%, I'd be starting Delane and Stroman at safety, like they did against Pitt. They went away from that against Florida State, and I'm not sure why, but I think this week, with Delane playing safety in the first half, and I would even like to see him stay there for the second half. Like, this isn't a team you have to worry too much about the pass with their quarterback. So get your best run stoppers on the field. And to me, like, delaying its safety would make Virginia Tech a better run stopping team.
You say blitz and hit the gap. It's like the risk is that they hit the home run play on that. They hit space. Well, they're doing that already.
Yeah. Yep.
It's been an issue all season. So what do you really have to lose in that case? It will be interesting to see how they come out defensively against this offense, because it's so unique and it does really stress your reads, and that's been the biggest problem for the Hokies all season.
Well, Chris, you mentioned the sack problem with Wake Forest, so definitely a good time to bring that up. One of the most sacked teams in all of college football to this point in the season. 22
sacks in 5 games. They got sacked, I believe, 8 times against Georgia Tech.
That's correct.
Yeah, and that'll that was a 7-point game until Georgia Tech scored like in the last 2 minutes to make it a 2-touchdown game, and then they lost to Clemson by 5. And I think they were sacked 4 times against Clemson, and so 12 sacks in your 2 losses, and they're both of them were winnable games up until the late fourth quarter, or in the Clemson game up until the very end. And you got to think, is that the difference? It might be the difference in at least one of those games. And so I don't know if it's the offensive line or the quarterback just being new and inexperienced. Maybe a little bit of both, but that's something that's been an issue for them so far. Virginia Tech's pressure, I would say, has been a little bit inconsistent so far this year. I think they got 5 sacks that first game against Old Dominion, but as it turns out, Old Dominion, I believe, is dead last in the country in sacks allowed per game so far.
And we hit them right on the average.
Right on the average. So, I would like to think that Tech can go out there and get 4 or so sacks against Wake Forest, because everybody else is doing at least that, and I think that would be very important. Get them behind the sticks in passing situations where they struggle. Their receivers are good. It's a good, experienced group of receivers, and even their fourth receiver is a guy named Wesley Grimes, and he was a top 10 recruit coming out of the state of North Carolina, a big-time 4-star recruit. So they've got talent on the outside and a lot of experience out there too. So I think the main issue is their quarterback, and if you can get them behind the sticks, put him in a position where he has to throw the ball downfield, I think that's advantage Virginia Tech.
Yeah, and you look at that Old Dominion game, they turned the ball over a couple times, giving up touchdowns in that game. That's why ODU got out to the big lead that it did. I think I saw David Hale from ESPN.com tweeted this, that I think Mitch Griffiths is like 112th nationally in QBR. Mm-hmm. That statistic ESPN.com has, and he's one spot nationally behind Phil Dracovic at Pitt. So that kind of tells you about how he's playing this season.
I don't think he's going to move to tight end, though.
I mean, you talk about Wake being 8-9 win team in the conversation in the ACC versus where it is now, and I mean, it just tells you how important Sam Hartman was to that team. Because like you said, I think a lot of the other pieces are similar to Wake teams in the past, but Hartman was just so perfect for that offense and understood what they needed and was so experienced and really could unlock that passing game that you go to somebody who's his understudy for a couple of years. It's just not quite the same. So, you mentioned Virginia Tech's pass rush. It's beaten up on bad offensive lines so far. I mean, Pitt got after Dracovic, ODU in the opener, as you mentioned. I mean, this could be an opportunity where they could get back there, and I think they could rattle Griffiths a little bit. They could be in his face, because that's kind of what Wake has done all year. I mean, Georgia Tech is not good. That's not a good team. They won that game. They won at Miami inexplicably, with Mario Cristobal screwing up the end of that game, and then they had 70 yards in 2 plays after I think they had like 130 all game or something like that. It was not a great offensive performance before that, and then somehow Miami ended up losing that game. So you see them, get kind of crushed at home. I know it was close, but then the final score was kind of ran away with it there against Georgia Tech, and you go, man, this is just not quite the same competitive Wake Forest team you've seen the last couple of years.
Griffiths, we talked about, a little bit undersized, 5'11", 193 to be exact. Just to look at his numbers, 1,150 passing yards, 9 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, so a little bit turnover prone when throwing the football. So, Chris, I ask you this. You like Tech's chances as far as Virginia Tech's secondary against these solid receivers for Wake Forest?
Yeah, and I think the Wake receivers are good. I think it's more about who's throwing them the football. Griffiths, like you said, he's undersized. He's got an interesting delivery. It's kind of 3/4 delivery. It looks a little weird coming out of his hand. I think he's got a good enough velocity on the ball, but I just don't think he can quite push it down the field. And probably the game's a little fast for him right now. I mean, he's a redshirt sophomore who's playing for the first time. I think he had 3 turnovers in that Georgia Tech game. And if you look at the total yardage in that game, it was pretty similar overall. It's just I think those 3 turnovers were the difference. So that's another key in this game is forcing turnovers. Virginia Tech forced 3 turnovers the first game against Old Dominion, and it turned what was a pretty close game into an easy win. They've only forced 2 turnovers since the Old Dominion game, and they were both against Marshall, and they still lost.
One was one of the worst passes I think I've ever seen.
Yes,
Kelly
horrible.
He basically handed it
Here
off
you
to
go.
Kelly Lawson.
Yeah, it was like a Waterboy when Bobby Boucher just handed the offensive player the ball so he could tackle him. But I think if Virginia Tech can force a couple turnovers, then I think that would be huge because Wake can't be one of those teams that gives away possession of the football and gives up easy scores. They have to make other teams earn it because they're not explosive enough offensively to overcome turnovers. And neither is Virginia Tech, quite frankly. So I think in this game, turnovers could be one of the deciding factors. I say that like neither team will probably turn the ball over.
Right. I think that starts with stopping the run again. I mean, you get those turnovers a lot on interceptions in situations where they have to pass or you can pressure the quarterback. It's a little bit less predictable with fumbles and getting the ball out or even recovering. I mean, it's a 50-50 shot when the ball's on the ground like that. So I think if they could force some opponents to be passing against them as opposed to just running untouched down the field for 80 yards and a touchdown, I think that's a big difference, and that could help in that turnover battle because they're just not having many opportunities right now.
I think we looked at this defense before the season and said the main strength is at cornerback. Well, that hasn't really mattered because Tech hasn't really forced any teams to have to throw the football so far this year, with the exception of the Pitt game. I would argue even that Marshall throwing the ball as much as they did wasn't good strategy on their part, considering they led for most of the game. So, I think if you need to get Wake in a Pitt-like situation where you're in long yardage and you have to throw the football, and if they do that, then they should end up winning the game.
I think it's completely fair to say that Virginia Tech has had kind of an issue with empty possessions this season, right? You have an offense that's struggling a little bit. And I feel like in this game, Tech could have less possessions than normal. One thing that really stood out to me is that Wake Forest can move the football. They're 3rd in the league in first downs, and they're 4th in the league in time of possession. Does that worry you at all? Because they can really kind of chew out some clock here, continue to elongate drives, and literally not give Virginia Tech the ball back for an extended period of time.
I think time of possession is a tricky thing. Ideally, you would like to have it. Like if you look at the Pitt time of possession, that was obviously in Virginia Tech's favor by a mile. But at the same time, I also think it was what did it end up being in the Florida State game? Do you remember?
I think Tech had the advantage.
Tech had the advantage.
Like 33-27
right,
or something like that.
Sometimes, and I want to say maybe against either Marshall or Rutgers, they also had.
It was 31. Yeah, 31-16 to 28-44.
So slight advantage for Tech in time of possession. And that's what happens when you allow explosive gains. You give up a 62-yard touchdown run on the second play of a drive, and you give up an 85-yard touchdown run on the first play of a drive, then you're going to have the time of possession advantage. But in that case, it's not a good thing because you're just allowing long touchdowns early in the drive.
When drives only last as long as it takes to sprint 100 yards to the end zone, that's not a good thing.
Yep.
That's not going to help your time of possession much. They'll look good look good in your time of possession. It won't look on the scoreboard.
No, if Tech goes out there and scores a bunch of explosive plays but only have the ball for 25 minutes, I would take that. It means you're scoring. But yeah, I mean, ideally, I'd love to have the ball 33 to 35 minutes or so in this game. But the most important thing here is that Virginia Tech stop allowing the explosive plays in the running game. If they can do that, I think it's going to be extremely difficult for Wake to beat them. But they've only shown the ability to do that in one of their 6 games so far.
How often do you think Wake Forest runs the football versus passes the foot? Like, Florida State was very, very balanced. You said going in they were going to be balanced. Your thoughts on the breakdown run pass for Wake?
Yeah, the slow mesh RPO is all read. So to a certain extent, you can dictate what they do by how you play your linebackers. Like I want ideally for Virginia Tech, and this is obviously what Clemson's been able to do. Their defensive line is so dominant that you don't have to be overly aggressive with your linebackers. And if your linebackers are laying back to a certain extent, he's going to hand the ball off, which is fine if your defensive line is dominant and getting penetration like Clemson's can do against them. But if it's not getting penetration and your linebackers are sitting back to defend the pass and make sure you hand it off, then I think that can lead to some chunk yardage. I would be more inclined to do the opposite. I would go after their running game hard, go after that slow mesh hard, and tell him to make the read to throw the football. Try to get them to throw it as much as possible. I think that greatens Virginia Tech's chances of win. I would actually be interested to see this week if like Clawson does less slow mesh than usual, because I do think when you give the quarterback the option on what to do, then the defense can sort of, how they play it, make that determination for the quarterback for him. And if you want Mitch Griffiths to throw the ball 30 times in a game, which I don't think is ideal for Wake Forest, it's ideal for the defense, you can kind of do that based on how you attack the slow mesh. So I wonder if like you might actually see less slow mesh than usual this week, just to make sure they get enough running plays in and make sure the game isn't on Griffith's arm when it comes down to the fourth quarter.
All I know is the Virginia Tech fans need to rattle Clawson again. If that means squirting water on him at halftime. Wasn't that the last time he was here? There was some controversy about that.
It was a student trainer he claimed was squirting water on the players, like going in at halftime or something like that.
Like with a water bottle, or like sitting with a hose, just like spraying them as they can. Like
with the bottles that's used for the players and things like that. I don't know.
That's just gamesmanship. Yeah. Come on, you gotta toughen up. A little water.
Yeah.
I remember that was like a brief controversy last time they were here.
There's no way that actually happened. I feel like that kid would lose their job immediately.
Yeah, no doubt.
I feel like nobody would be.
And to be fair, Clawson came back later and said it wasn't that big of a deal. It's just people talking in the heat of a moment. You know.
Right. Also, they lost the game.
That generally makes you more.
That was
frustrated.
Bud's last game in Lane, correct?
No, well,
yes,
or was that his?
No,
that was Bud Foster Day.
That was Bud Foster Day.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was Bud Foster Day, and that was like a great team effort. I think Tech really dominated the time of possession in that game. Like
they did.
They had a great game plan. They kept Wake's offense off the field, and the defense played well in that game too.
I remember it being like low scoring at halftime, like 6-3 or something, and then there was 10-6. There was a lot more scoring in the second half. Wake was missing that wide receiver they had,
Roberson or something.
No, it was Washington.
I was gonna say the kid that went to. Was it the Richmond kid?
Yeah, maybe. I don't remember, but he was their best receiver that year, and they were missing him in that game, and that really hurt them. But the main thing about that game is Tech's defensive line dominated and got a lot of penetration, and I think you've got to try to replicate the same thing this week. So you're really looking at those defensive tackles to get some penetration, which they haven't done a great job of so far this year.
Well, let's go ahead and stay on that note here with you guys kind of brought up Virginia Tech and Wake Forest, an older game. Let's kind of stay there. And I ask you this, any good memories between these two teams? I find it very interesting. The all-time record, 25 wins for Virginia Tech, 13 losses, 1 tie. But they've only played, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times since Tech has joined the ACC. So they actually played a lot back in the day throughout. They pretty much played every single year in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s.
I think... I don't go back that far.
Right.
But I think the first road trip I ever took for an ACC game was to Tech Wake Forest in 2004. That might have actually been Tech's first ACC road game, if I remember correctly. And it was a really good game. And
October 9th, 04.
Yeah, Tech won 17-10.
That's a good memory.
Yeah. I remember a year, I think Tyrod's senior year, when Tech's rush defense wasn't so good. And I want to say Tech beat them 52-21 or something like that. But a Wake Forest running back rushed for 250 yards in that game. I forget his name, but he had a monster game.
I remember this. I forget the running back's name, but it was just a randomly huge number that he ran for.
Yeah. And obviously, who can forget 2014?
That's the one that's seared in my memory.
Absolutely.
That's the only thing I think of when Virginia Tech Wake Forest is the 6-3 double overtime game. That was like performance art. It was such a bad game that you're like, this is actually beautiful.
It was
how
perfectly
bad.
bad. Yeah, yeah.
It's just like, okay, they've crossed midfield. How are they going to screw it up this time? That was both teams.
Yeah.
Both teams would get there. It's like they're going to miss a field goal. They're going to turn it over. They're going to do something stupid. And sure enough, they get, and then, immortalized with the 0-0 gif of Frank.
How long
Weaver
had you been on the beat
end.
at that time?
That was third year on the beat at that point.
So I remember Tech dropped a pick 6 in that game in the first half, and I remember sitting there thinking, I hope that doesn't come back to bite them.
Missed opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be more. It's like, no, there weren't. That was a phenomenal game though.
That was
in
in
hindsight, it's like I can't believe I witnessed that in
Yeah,
person. That was
no doubt.
like wow.
That was in Lane, right?
No, that was in Bizarro Lane.
Okay.
Down in Wake Forest Stadium.
That is-
Wake Forest, Indiana, and Virginia Tech have the exact same
Right,
stadium
pretty
side with like the stair step on the side.
Yep.
Wasn't it by
Yep.
the same?
Probably
Yeah,
the
I
same
think they were
architecture.
built by the same company in the same year.
Right.
But,
Obviously, Lane has expanded and added onto it more than the other two schools.
well, I think Wake has done a really nice job with that stadium.
Yeah.
And the press seating and everything is really good. And they've got that hill on the side that I've always thought is kind of cool down there. So that was a memory. And then what was the other one? 2020? Was it the pandemic year where they went
Yes.
down there as favorites? And I think Hendon Hooker threw 3 interceptions,
picks.
all to Nick Anderson. Got walk-on safety Nick Anderson got a scholarship, I think, based on that game. That was a frustrating loss because Virginia Tech was kind of humming at that point, and then they got. Was that before or after the North Carolina loss? But the North Carolina loss could kind of
it was after.
It
Because
could kind
Hooker-
of be explained away because of all the COVID
stuff,
absences
right?
and just what the defense
well,
was.
Yeah, it was after North Carolina because Hooker came back for the North Carolina game.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, and he was back full time by the Wake game, and actually had the worst game of his career that day with 3 picks.
Yeah, there was some red zone struggles. I remember Jared Hewitt got a BS targeting ejection.
Yeah,
that was
I'd
like
forgotten
really
about that
crucial, and like there's no way that play should have been targeted, and he went berserk on the field. He was like chucked his helmet, like he had to be escorted off the field by the training staff, and I understand, justifiably so. He's pretty upset after they called that against him there, but that was one where it's like, man, they gave that game away. They really should have won that game.
Yeah, that they should have. Wake was the only team to stop Khalil Herbert that year, from what I remember. I think they held him to only 70-some yards, which is a solid day for most backs. 64.
Good memory.
Yeah. And
Sam Hartman only threw for 110 yards that day.
Wow.
Well, they had 2 backs that ran pretty well. Was Kenneth Walker there at that point? Or
Yeah, but he only ran for 66. They had Beal Smith.
Beal Smith was
who ran for 129.
Forgot about him.
Well, anything else on the offense before we head to David, and then we flip the script and talk about the defensive side of the football for Wake Forest?
No, I think we pretty much well covered it, I think.
All right. David, you got anything for us in the 4th chair over there?
Yeah, I think while we're talking about the offense, we kind of talked about it going into the Florida State game. What would you consider, obviously this is a very winnable game, unlike the Florida State game. What would you consider an offensive success on Saturday? Like, is it this team has to play well, come out with a win, or is it if you continue to see steps forward, that'll be enough?
I want to continue to see the same scheme we've seen the last couple of weeks. I don't want to revert back to like Marshall, where it was very little motion, very little deception. Ideally, you see the Pitt game all over again in terms of run-to-pass ratio. I don't think you should come out pass at Wake held Clemson to like 130 passing yards last week. Their secondary's good, so it would not make sense to come out and start throwing a ball against a team that shut down Clemson's passing game in their previous game, because Clemson's passing game is obviously better than Tech's. So you might have some rain, and they're saying maybe 15 to 25 mile an hour winds on Saturday. So it seems like one of those games where you should run the dang ball a lot.
I'm gonna buy you that hat.
Yeah,
that's gonna be perfect.
So yeah, run the dang ball, and that's what I want to see from the offense. Schematically, I was fine with the Florida State game. I just wasn't happy with the run-pass ratio. And I think when you look at Wake's strengths and weaknesses, they're better at stopping the pass than they are at stopping the run. Virginia Tech's better at running than they are passing. might be rainy and windy. So it all adds up to one of those games where you're going to run the ball a whole lot, and they need to go in there and stick with that plan, I think. It might be if they do that, I mean, and Wake kind of does the same thing. If they're more run heavy, then you could see a shorter game, maybe a couple possessions fewer than you would see in a normal game. So it's not one where you should expect a lot of points. Granted, that's any Virginia Tech game. Tech has scored 17 or fewer points in 4 of their last 5 games, with the Pitt game being the lone exception. So I will say, I don't want to say the goal is to score 20 because that sounds bad, but I feel like if you get in the 24 to 27 range, you've got a very strong chance to win the game.
Haven't they scored exactly 17?
One of the games they only scored 16. The Rutgers game they only scored 16.
Okay.
35 to 16. I forget how that happened.
Yeah, because they went for 2.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're like a dealer in blackjack. Like you get to 17 and you have to stop. Like no, you keep scoring points. That's what you need to do is score some points. This team can't be the blackjack offense where they stop before they get to 21. They have to actually get into the end zone. And you even look at last week, they scored 17. Well, 7 came off that kick return for touchdown. So offensive points, they only had 10 in that game. And I realize Florida State, better opponent than what they played some other times, but it feels like they just left opportunities on the field, whether it's bogging down once you get into the red zone, or settling for a field goal, or a 4th down that they try and sort of that no man's land where they're 35-yard line or something. They want to try a long field goal. They just got to get in the end zone. It's not a smart ass answer about what they need to do offensively. They need to score more points. I mean, it's great that they can run the ball a little bit better, and drones brings an element to the offense. Fine. Can they score points? Because that's going to determine whether you can win these games.
I want to do some 6-3 trivia real quick from the from the 2014 game. Virginia Tech, how many drives in a row from the beginning of the game did Virginia Tech punt consecutively?
6.
10.
It was 5.
Oh.
Tech punted three other times in a row after halftime. So Tech punted 5 times, fumbled, then it was halftime, then punted 3 times, fumbled again, then threw an interception, punted, and then it was the end of the game.
Then kicked a field goal.
And then kicked a field goal, and then missed a field goal.
Missed a field goal in overtime.
How long was the missed field goal?
It was pretty long because I think they got backed up.
It was
with a sack.
53.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because you knew they were in trouble. They got sacked. It's like, oh no, this is going to come down.
Do you remember who Virginia Tech's kicker was?
Joey Sly.
Wow.
Which was 2014.
He was good that year, too.
He doesn't miss many field goals, even from 53.
How many field goal attempts did Wake Forest have in the game?
3. We know they missed 1 in regulation.
Well, they made 2.
Wake Forest had 5.
So they missed.
Yeah,
Wake
they missed a lot.
Well, I don't remember the guy's first name. Weaver was his last name. He missed his first 3 field goals, and then all 3 of them in regulation.
You're right.
And then he missed 2 in made 2 in overtime.
Almost
Virginia Tech quarterback Michael Brewer. How many yards did he throw for?
143.
Yeah, it had to be less than 200.
126.
Yeah, I remember Wake that year. Wake played it smartly against Tech defensively. Tech was starting all freshman receivers. Like 2 of them, Isaiah Ford, Cam Phillips, went on to become great players. And they were solid players as freshmen. They played better than they probably should have. But they weren't physically strong enough to deal with press coverage and physical play at the line of scrimmage. And Wake did a lot of that stuff and just threw off the passing game completely, but still 0 points. Not great.
Virginia Tech had 16 tackles for loss. There were 4 guys who had 2.5 tackles for loss each. Can you name them?
Hoi.
Akanum?
Kenna Canum was 1.
Daddy Nicholas.
Daddy Nicholas was 2.
Chase Williams?
No, the other 2 were
Nigel
one was
Williams?
a linebacker, one was a safety.
Who was the other linebacker?
The guy, who was the Sam linebacker on that team that got sent home early from the the bowl game
Oh yeah.
in 2015. I'm blanking on his name.
It was not him. It was Tex.
It wasn't Deion Clark.
It was Tex Mike.
Masuapaka.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. And the safety.
And the safety who is currently in the NFL.
Terrell Edmonds.
Chuck Clark.
But he's been hurt. Chuck Clark.
Chuck Clark. Okay.
Yeah. And Tech had one interception.
I think Kendall Fuller had one.
It was Donovan Riley.
Oh, okay.
All right.
So a lot of good stats.
The hero
for
of the
defense that
Ohio
day.
State.
Yeah, a lot of good stats, except a 6-3 score line where Virginia Tech lost in 2 overtimes in a game that lasted 3.5 hours.
That's wild.
Glorious. You're never going to see a game like that. That's the thing. It's like, how many games have you seen where it's like, okay, I've sort of seen this before. You're never going to see that again.
And
That's why when you're covering, you're like, this is great.
There were only 8 total penalties in the game, too.
I think Tech got upset in basketball that day too by some like minor bad
November
low major.
22nd, 2014.
I think that was Buzz's first year.
It was Buzz's first.
Yeah, and I think I remember the basketball game starting in the middle of the football game, or maybe right after the football game. So I watched that game. The way game.
It was Tech lost to Appalachian State that day.
That's
Oh
right.
man.
Yeah. So I sat there and was watching both at some point.
Bad day for
Yeah.
Tech Athletic.
Is that one of those ones where Buzz gave like a 2-hour post-game speech to the
That's
team?
a good
or
question. Yeah.
I think that was West Virginia.
That was West
They
Virginia.
got crushed in
Never
that one.
forget that one.
That was a bad day to be a Virginia Tech Hokie.
Yes, it was.
With the typo
Or
on our.
Virginia Tech Hoaki.
Yeah, there we go. Andy, I kind of want to ask you this. I found it was interesting. If you had to pick like 3 games that were like the most memorable that you ever covered, what would they be? Would this be one of them?
That would certainly be one of them. I mean, there's some memorably great games
Right.
too, like Auburn, Alabama in 2010, where Auburn is down 24-0 and comes back and wins that game with Cam Newton at quarterback to go to the SEC championship on a national championship season. That one sort of stands out
Right,
in my
yeah.
memory as being a great game. I'm trying to think of what another one. You know, that Independence Bowl was just kind of nuts, just for how unique it was, where it's like, what was it, 55-52 as a
Yeah.
final?
As you would imagine, Frank
Yeah.
Beamer's last game
how
is a
Frank
shootout.
Beamer's last game would be 107 points in this game going up and down the field. I mean, the North Carolina 6 overtime game. I mean, these games that are
Right.
unique, where it's just like,
Probably the Ohio State game.
yeah, Ohio State, just in terms of magnitude of that one.
Which one? In lane or
the,
on the
the
road?
one in the Horseshoe.
Yeah.
That was an incredible game, just great atmosphere. I mean, LeBron James is on the sideline before the game. Those are the ones that you remember. But this one, 6-3, stands out for obviously other reasons. And you know, every time I see the Frank Beamer arms up with the 0-0 score, I mean, it brings a smile to my face.
When you write your memoirs one day, will you dedicate a chapter to that game?
I might. David Hale, I'll bring him up again on ESPN.com, did like a oral history of that game, and it was just, there was nothing interesting to say about it. Everybody he talked to was like, yeah, it was a pretty bad game. Like, I mean, there was no insight or interesting anecdotes from it. It was like, yeah, both offenses were pretty bad. Pretty bad.
Chris.
It's like, we knew that.
Chris, I went and read your recap from the Appalachian State
Basketball
game.
Oh, Lord.
Tech lost with 2 seconds. App State hit a shot with 2 seconds left to win.
Of course they did.
So combine that with losing 6-3.
Right. Well, that's like the weekend when Tech lost to Florida State in the ACC title game and then lost on a buzzer beater at Duke the next day. But at the same time, that's a lot different than losing to Wake Forest 6-3 and Appalachian State.
You'd rather be playing for an ACC
Yeah.
title and playing
Yeah.
close with Duke on the road.
I'd take a 6-3 loss in the ACC title game this year.
Yeah.
I think that'd be a great success.
I don't know if Jim Phillips would like a 6-3
I
ACC
don't think he
champion.
probably-
I don't think that would really drive TV ratings too much or change the ACC narrative.
Ugh.
Cal, SMU, and Stanford would be like, we might hold off on this one.
No, they won't.
That's true.
Like, let us in. We'll
I
take a
guess
steep discount to do it.
There's
Thank you
some
very
serious
much.
desperation going on in the Pac-12. Yeah, no doubt. Well, let's bring it back to the football game on Saturday and the defensive side of the ball for Wake Forest. How about Jasheen Davis? I mean, he offers a lot defensively, kind of a force for Wake Forest.
I think Wake is solid across the board defensively. I think ever since they hired their new defensive coordinator, who's a former coach at Georgia, a couple other Power 5 schools, and was the head coach at Charlotte, Kevin Lambert, I want to say. I think he's made their defense better pretty much overnight. their talent level's fairly similar across the board, with the exception of Jashin Davis, the defensive end. He was a pretty good recruit with a good, solid offer list, a lot of Power 5 offers, and he's going to be one of those guys who might end his career with like 50 tackles for loss and 30 sacks. He's been an extremely prolific player, and if he played for somebody with a bigger name, I think more people would talk about him. I think he's only been like third team, maybe all ACC, but I think last year he had 17 tackles for loss and 9 sacks or something like that. 6'3", 259. He's got very good size coming off the edge, and he's pretty relentless too. He's got a big motor. So we talk about Virginia Tech needing to get pressure on Wake Forest and put them behind the chains. Wake's going to be looking to do the same thing. You can make the exact same argument. It's like, let's get Kyron Drones in the Virginia Tech passing offense in 3rd and 12 and see what they do then. Well, obviously he can still scramble, but still you'd rather have him, rather have Tech throwing the football in that situation. And Davis can be a guy who can impact that. They've got 2 good pass rushers. Davis is one of them. Jacob Roberts, their middle linebacker, is another one. He's not great against the run, but I think he's got 4.5, 5 sacks or something already this year. He is a transfer from North Carolina A&T, where he was their starting middle linebacker. So this game is going to feature a starting middle linebacker and a starting running back that played for North Carolina A&T last year. Which
hired this North Carolina A&T staff. My goodness, they're plucking talent all over the place.
Apparently so.
Were they both part of the COVID recruiting class, where they kind of slipped through the cracks?
I mean, Tootin was for sure. I'm not sure about Roberts.
He's a senior.
He's a senior. I don't know if he redshirted or not, but it's certainly possible. You know who North Carolina A&T's starting running back is now?
That would be Kenji Christian.
It would be Kenji Christian.
I was answering a mailbag question this week. Somebody asked how the outgoing transfers have done this year. Also, Elijah Howard has like 500 rushing yards for Central Connecticut State.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I knew because Lechtenberg obviously recruited him, and he was a great high school tailback. His film in high school as running back was pretty awesome, and not surprised he ended up there. Not surprised he ended up switching back to running back. Obviously, Jalen Hampton's having another good year at Elon. I think he was a 1,000-yard rusher last year. Tech's had some, they had enough running backs there. Like, none of those guys would have been dominant, but, like, they could have helped the situation last year when Tech basically ran out of running backs.
Could they have? I mean, they look good at these FCS schools, but it's like maybe they were meant for a lower level. Maybe that's where they were
I think
meant to be.
I think Hampton's the one that could have helped the most. I don't think he was, like, great at anything, but I don't think he was bad at anything either. But oh well, different subject.
What do you see on this Wake Forest defense that maybe Virginia Tech can exploit on Saturday against the Demon Deacons?
I think they're, like I said, they're stronger against the pass than they are against the rush. They've got experienced players. I mean, they've got experienced players everywhere. And I think that, but it's a lot of guys who have redshirted, a lot of juniors, only 2 sophomores in the whole starting lineup, and everybody else is juniors or seniors. Now, they do only start 2 seniors, so they're going to bring back 9 starters next year. So it should be a good Wake Forest defense next year. Actually, same on offense. I think they only have 2 seniors on that side of the ball. So it's mostly it's a junior-oriented defense that seems to be stronger against the pass than they are against the rush. Both their starting defensive tackles are 282 pounds, so they're not the biggest guys. Not that size is I mean, you've seen Pitt makes a living off 280-pound defensive tackles, right? But, like I said, come out, got to establish the run. And I would say that even if, like, Wake's strength was the other way around, because you have to play to your own strengths. And so I think you've got to – I think ideally Tootin's touches have to equal or exceed – Kyron Drone pass attempts. I think that's the way to go. Because, if Tech is going to run the 2019 Hendon Hooker offense, the games where Tech was most successful that year, Hooker had between 15 and 25 pass attempts. So the games where he went over 25 pass attempts where Tech lost, like the UVA game. So I think I just look at the run-pass ratio breakdown, and I think I have a pretty good, clear picture of what needs to happen. But sometimes crazy things can happen in football, and you can throw stats out the window, but that's how I look at it going into this one.
Sometimes that's chicken and egg, though. It's like, were they losing because they weren't throwing that much, or they throwing that much because they were losing to start out? So, like that Hooker game against UVA, I mean, they had to throw it
At the end,
they were
yeah, they
down
had to.
at the end. So, sometimes those stats can be misleading, but yes, that should be the target: is get the ball to Tootin as much as you can, because look at what he did last week, hurdling over defenders into the end zone, and what he did on the kick return. I think every time he touches the ball, that's a great thing for Tech.
Well, you mentioned the special teams. Really, on both sides, your run-of-the-mill type stuff on special teams, besides the fact that they're probably going to be kicking the ball away from Bayshore Tootin on Saturday, you'd have to think.
You would think so. That's the first kickoff return for a touchdown for his career. Like, he didn't even break a big long one against A&T, or for A&T. So you didn't really see that one coming. But obviously, he's very, very capable with the ball in his hands, and I would try to keep it out of his hands. Ideally, you put it through the end zone, but I think if you look at this Virginia Tech offense, if you're from a Wake Forest perspective and say, okay, we held Clemson to 17 points. Georgia Tech scored 30 on us, but it was because of 3 turnovers. And Old Dominion scored 20-something on us, but that was because of 2 or 3 turnovers. Like, I think one or two of them were returned for touchdowns. So Wake's defense has been put in bad situations by their offense this year. So I think if you're Wake Forest, you're like, okay, first of all, don't turn the ball over and put the defense in a bad situation. But secondly, Tech's offense, they've scored 17 or fewer points in 4 of the last 5 games. Don't give them a cheap one on kickoff return, right? Because if you force them to score X number of points to beat you, if you force their offense to do that, then they probably won't be able to do it. So, yeah, I don't think I would be kicking towards him this week. And special teams battle, it doesn't seem like there's really any big difference between either team. Matthew Dennis is a good kicker. Hasn't been really tested from beyond 50, but that's probably most college kickers. It's one of those games where I look at both rosters and you don't necessarily see a special teams play being the decider, but most of the time you don't see that in game previews, until it happens during a game, but big plays on special teams are generally unpredictable. But it is one of those games where on paper it's going to be a close game, so one big play on special teams could decide things.
David, anything else in the 4th chair from you before we play some buy, sell, or hold to wrap things up for the day?
Yeah, I've got I got a big picture thing. This was a question we had on Monday that I didn't get a chance to talk about. But is a question, I'll read it off. How long is it going to take to turn around what is the Titanic of Hokie football programs? Or does the staff steer us square into the iceberg and sink VT football to the bottom of the proverbial P5 college football ocean? In all seriousness, I read Andy's 5 thoughts post Florida State, and there's a common theme. Why does Virginia Tech keep doing it? Why do we keep doing? Why are we not doing? Why hasn't this been fixed? At this point in the season, what is going on? Why do things continue to go the same way, and can it be fixed?
I think there's certain things you can fix during a season and certain things that you can't. I don't think you're going to automatically fix that inside linebacker situation during the season. Tech's going to need a reset there in the offseason. They're going to have to bring in at least one new true inside linebacker from the transfer portal, in my opinion. But you can't do that in the middle of the season. You just you have to take it game-by-game basis, and maybe one matchup favors you, maybe another one doesn't. But the one thing that is in their control, I think, is how they approach offense, and that is to be a run-heavy football team and help your defense out. I think that's the main thing you can do is keep the clock moving. Even if you don't score, if you can churn out 2 or 3 first downs in a drive, take time off the clock, improve field position, things like that. I think that's very important for how this team has to win. As far as how fast you turn it around, I mean, look, every program's different. Some programs, I do think a long-term rebuild these days is less feasible than it was in the past, because people aren't going to be as patient these days because of the transfer portal. They're going to look around and see that Colorado turned around in 1 year, and they're going to look and see that Duke, of all teams, turned it around in 1 year. Went from 0-8 in the ACC and losing by an average of 30 points a game to winning 9 games the next year. And so I think it is possible, and it does still happen, but ideally you would show some year-to-year progress in records, and we'll just have to wait and see what Tech's record is at the end of this year. If they end up winning 5 or 6 games or something like that, you can look at that and say, yeah, they made some progress. But if they're stuck on 3 or 4, you can look at it and say, well, they improved their talent level, but still didn't really make any progress from a win-loss standpoint. I don't know where that's going to end up. But I do think the long-term rebuild is a little less feasible these days. But we'll see. We got till the end of the season.
Yeah, it's tough to tell. I mean, every rebuild is different. I'd say it helps to have a star player to accelerate that. I think Riley Leonard qualifies at Duke. Michigan State had a big turnaround a couple years ago. Kenneth Walker was a Heisman finalist.
Transfer from Wake Forest.
Yeah. TCU last year, the quarterback's up there in the Heisman race himself. I mean, those kind of turnarounds, I think it helps to have just like a star player leading the way. And there's not really that on this team. I don't see that in this group. So, how long will it take? I don't know. Will it happen? I mean, I'm not convinced that this coaching staff can get it done. They still have to prove that to me at this point. Mm-hmm. And, it's been, how many games have they played, coach, now? 17?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like this is 3 games in or something like this. This is a year and a half. And I know it's a slow process. You'd like to see a little bit more progress with it at this point so far. So there are some situations that have been really slow builds. There are some that have been quick. I think there's no firm blueprint on how you do this. And if everybody knew how to do it, it would be a lot simpler when you're making these coaching hires, and you wouldn't see so many just absolute busts that the ADs hire over the years.
Chris, I have a linebacker specific question. You've talked about the mics and how Tech we've made it known that Tech needs to bring in mics in the offseason because none of these guys, besides maybe the 2 freshmen, are the guys for this spot. How do you feel about, like, when you look at the big picture of this Virginia Tech football team, do you feel like there are any other spots across the football team where there are guys just playing completely out of position there, like they don't have a guy? Or is that kind of the only spot? And then when you look at the rest of the linebackers, do you feel like everybody's kind of in their right position? Like, for example, Kelly Lawson, do you feel like he is a will, or should he be playing star kind of thing?
I think eventually he'll be big enough and strong enough to play will. But I think if you could draw it up perfectly, he would be your star linebacker right now. I would rather him be getting blocked by slot receivers and tight ends than offensive guards and offensive tackles. I just don't think right now he's the physical guy that you need at the boundary linebacker position. The thing is, though, like, so many guys Tech has recruited are already star linebacker types. I mean, Gabriel Williams is basically a star linebacker. Obviously, they recruited Caleb Woodson specifically for that position. So if you move Kelly Lawson there, you block him. Even when they were recruiting Chris Cole never played linebacker until last year, and he's never played inside linebacker until this year. So outside of Ace and Stevens, you're just seeing them recruit a bunch of guys who were basically whips in the old, like, Bud Foster scheme. And I think there needs to be more of a focus on true inside linebackers. I think what they've got to figure out after this season is, who do they want to target in the portal? How many do they want to target in the portal? Right now, I'm thinking they definitely need a Mike and probably somebody who can play Mike and Will. And those other linebackers, they've got to decide whether they want to continue with Kelly Lawson at Will, or if they want to try him at Sam. Even a guy like Jaden Keller, who was a safety in high school, and just, I'm not even sure he played much defense at all because there's hardly any defensive highlights on his tape. It's like Caleb Farley never played defense till he got to Virginia Tech, but he was a corner. James Anderson was a quarterback in high school and didn't play much, if any, defense, and he didn't break out at Tech until his 4th year, but that was after they moved him to the whip spot and got him outside the box. I just think Tech's linebackers like Keller and like Lawson could be so much more effective on that wide side of the field, where you only have to, like, there's not as many moving parts. You can read to your inside. That's basically all it is, and there's not guys coming from both directions trying to take your head off. It's a more simple game out there, and I think those guys could benefit from playing that position. But there's so many of them. Like if you moved one or both of those guys to that position, you've still got Keontae Jenkins there,
who has another year.
You've still got Caleb Woodson there. Obviously, so you're overloading guys who are the best fit for that one position. So I think they need to reset this offseason. They've got to figure out the guys in the program right now where they need to play, and you got to be honest with them. I expect they'll keep Lawson at will, but I really don't know. But I think you got to go out and get 2 true inside linebackers in the portal, and then after that, figure out what you're going to do with everybody else.
All right, let's play a little bit of buy, sell, or hold, fellas.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to keep score this time, I promise, and we'll talk about it on Monday as well after the game and kind of keep track from here on out. But we'll start us off with Tech scores first.
This could go either way. I'll go no.
You're going to sell. Okay.
I'll buy. They had a fast start last time at home.
Andy
I think they'll do it
says
again.
buy. David?
I'll sell.
He's going to sell. All right. And there's also a couple in here that we're going to play like you can't hold. They're kind of like over-under type things.
Okay, yeah.
So it'll be fun. Somebody leads by double digits at some point in this game. Whether it's Wake or Tech, somebody has a double-digit lead.
Sell.
All right.
I will. No, I'm going to buy that one. I think Tech has been streaky like that.
Okay.
It's fair.
David?
I'll buy it too.
I
think I could totally see Wake Forest coming out and leading 14-0, or Tech, for that matter. You mentioned streaky, Andy. Tech come out, lead 14-0, and then Wake get back in the game. Like, I think it's very, or go up 10-0. Like, it's very possible.
Yeah, or Tech trails 17 and then comes back and ties it 17-17. Like they do quite often, it feels like. Kyron Drones has 4 or more passing plays of 12 or more yards. That was kind of a struggle bus last week.
Buy.
12, I'll buy.
Buy. What would been of your denominator if I said 20 or more?
Yeah,
20, I would definitely say
sold on
sold.
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You said 4 or more pass plays of 20 or more.
12 or more.
12 or more yards. He had
2 last week,
He had
right?
3 last week.
Okay.
Of 12, he had 1 of 12 and 2 above 12.
And one wiped out the
Gosnell would have been 17 yards.
Yeah,
and one where he
I'm
didn't
gonna hold.
One where you didn't see Felton coming across the middle on that reverse flea flicker too.
David says hold. I feel like looking back, I should have made it 15. That might have stirred the pot a little bit more.
Yeah.
A lesson for next week.
A lesson for next week. There we go. Kyron Drones. Honestly, we have bigger problems. If he doesn't have 4 or more plays of 12 or more passing yards, we're in a tough spot.
Probably.
Against Wake Forest. Kyron Drones goes turnover free this week. Did it last week, but had 2 that should have been. Could have been, I should say. Maybe not should have.
It might be raining. Might be an ugly game. I think they'll limit his throws. At least they should. They need to go run heavy and then throw off the passing or off the running game.
We could still have a turnover. Like Bashal could fumble.
Yeah.
And Kyron's still clean.
Still clean. Hadn't done it until last week, but there was one last week that got wiped out by kind of a iffy roughing the passer.
I'm gonna sell it.
I'm gonna sell it.
I'm selling. He's fumbled every week. He's had a fumble every week as a starter.
Yeah.
I agree with you guys. Kyron Drones. Okay, so we're going to go. This is one of those over-unders. Kyron Drones, 26.5 passing attempts. He had 32 against Rutgers, 35 against Marshall, 19 against Pitt, 27 against Florida State.
Under, so sell, I guess, right?
I'll say under on that one.
I better be under.
If the Hokies want to win, I think that number better be under.
What did you say?
26.5.
You're putting it right under the 27 of Florida State from last week?
That is correct, but it's pretty much an average of all of them.
It should be under. I'm going to go under. Because what did Chris say? Bashaw Tootin should have the same or more touches than Kyron Drones has passes. That's the way it should be. Like if Kyron Drones somehow has 30 passes, then Bashaw Tootin better have 5 catches and 25 runs.
Yeah, right, exactly. I think Drones is a very effective player when you use him properly. And as he showed against Pitt, you just have to use him properly.
If he throws it 30 times in bad weather against this team, I think that's bad news for the Hokies on Saturday.
I might stay in Charleston if that happens.
Kyron Drones, 19.5 carries. He had 22 against Rutgers, 15 against Marshall, 21 against Pitt, 14 against Florida State.
I'll go under.
I think under. That's a lot of carries for a quarterback, even one like Drones who touches it a lot.
Under.
Under? Wow, everybody's saying under, even though he has had more multiple times. Interesting. All right, we're going under. Griffiths, the quarterback for Wake Forest, 220 or more passing yards.
Under.
Yeah,
let's hope.
Under. Yeah, Wake isn't going to need to. I don't think Wake's going to need to pass the ball. Tech's going to try to make them, but
if they threw for 220 or against Tech, that would be very disappointing from a defensive standpoint for the Hokies.
I would agree. Wake Forest, 160 or more rushing yards. That's pretty much right at their average.
Yeah, well, everybody else rushes for more than their average on Tech, so I think by default you have to go over. I knew you were going to ask that. I didn't know what you were going to say.
You said 160?
160.
Every single
thinking,
team except for Pitt has run for over 179 yards.
So I was thinking you were going to set it at like 175, maybe even 200.
185 would. Yeah, I might even have to think.
So let's
165. I'm going over.
Yeah,
easily.
I'm going over.
So let's set it there. Let's set it at 185.
Oh my God!
What does that change? Let's make it more fun. You did it to yourself.
I'll still go slightly over.
Okay.
I'll go under. Under 185.
That's a lot.
I feel like it's a pride thing at a certain point.
David?
Just,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Andy.
no, you just, how many times do you have to hear about how bad you are at stopping the run before you do something about it?
Right.
See, 160 is like obvious. I feel like I'm going to go under.
All right. I like this. We have some mix here. Virginia Tech, 120 or more rushing yards. Seems like they're going to have to.
Oh, it better be over than that. If it's not,
I'll say over.
Yeah.
This is not Purdue.
And Tech is actually should try to run.
I mean, this
the
is
ball.
120 is right
Purdue's
about at
not
our
good
average.
at stopping the run.
Right.
Can we?
No, I know.
Giving up 199 yards a game last 4 games.
That was more sarcasm.
Have
than
they really?
Yeah.
Oh,
that was
good
more
times.
sarcasm than anything. Yeah, Tech's over. I think Tech's gonna
because this is pretty much right at the average.
Yeah, I mean, well,
the average is dragged down by that 11 yards.
I mean, since Drones has come in, Virginia Tech has ran for 130, 185, 199, 209.
It's been escalating.
Yeah. Like I expect it to be like 210.
Wow, 210.
Better be.
All right, so everyone's over. Interesting.
Especially in the rain.
All right. Virginia Tech, 200 or more passing yards. Right on the dot. Under.
Yeah, considering
under.
There's a trend
Drones
here.
You never know. They might hit a big play. You never know. But because it certainly could have been over that last week if they had hit that big play. But like I look at Wake and how they shut down Clemson's passing
That big
offense
play would have
last
gone
week.
for how many? Probably like 50, 60?
Yeah.
I mean, Tech had 104 passing yards.
Yeah,
last
so
week.
they could have been. They left some passing yards out there last week.
I'm almost embarrassed by my lines this week. I seem to have missed the mark just a little bit here.
I don't know.
Virginia Tech, 4 or more sacks. You said this is kind of the litmus test.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's a good one.
They're giving up 4 sacks a
or
game.
more. So I would say true. Right, I'll say right at 4.
Yeah, I think they're going to hit 4.
Yeah.
That would be my number.
David, you got 4?
Yeah.
4 sacks?
Yeah, I'll take that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like it. Tech goes for it on 4th down, over or under 1.5 times. Went for it on 4th down 3 times in a drive last week.
Oh yeah, man. If that it'll.
So basically, are they going 1 or 2 times?
If there's a sense of desperation at the end of the game, you don't want that you don't want to be in that situation. But if you're go for it on some 4th and 1s, that shows that you're getting ahead of the chains a little bit, maybe. 1.5. I'll go over.
Over. Bad weather. you're going to get in those sort of no man's land field goal attempt things. And I think they'll go for some there.
Over. And let me tell you this. Virginia Tech has played 6 games this season. Each time Virginia Tech has gone for it at least twice. Every single game.
There you go.
Well, there you go.
There you go. Is the weather going to be that bad? Because I'm going to have to be
It's
down
like
there
the
with
one
a
day-
camera.
It's the one day of the week in like a 2-week span where there's rain on the forecast, possibly.
I
So
saw it was
I
in
don't
the
know if
morning. Hopefully, we're
I don't know if it's going to be as bad as we're making it out to be, but it has the possibility to not be great.
I sure hope not. It's not fun
It,
being
it
down
looks
there with
like
a camera.
it's going to rain kind of in the morning. Like it might rain around the game.
Okay.
So
That'd be fine.
Hold
I'd be
on.
good with
Yeah.
that.
I'd be okay
it's
with
supposed to be warm. So that's good.
that. Okay. All right. Let's see. We taking the over under in this? We taking the over or the under? It's at 47.
47. Oh, I don't remember what final score I picked.
I could tell you.
Under.
I'm going under on
I
47.
think I picked it like 24 to so under. Yeah.
You picked it 24-20.
Yeah. So under.
Okay. Everybody's saying under. That does seem like a little bit of a high over under, but Vegas always seems to know something that nobody else does. They're pretty spot on most of the time. And then who's everyone got winning this one for those that didn't get a chance to read the preview? Virginia Tech is 1.5 point favorites at home.
It's interesting the way that line moved because it opened at Wake 1.5.
Yeah.
We gave Andy the home dog.
Yeah.
Or home favorite. Sorry.
I'm picking Wake, and this is the first game this year where I actually started writing the preview, and I didn't know who I was going to pick before I started writing the preview. I'm picking Wake based on the fact that they're used to winning football games at this point, and Tech is not used to winning football games at this point. And I'm picking Wake based on coaching experience. I mean, Dave Clawson has built 4 programs from scratch. He took over 4 bad programs and made them winning programs. He's got an offensive coordinator that's been with him since 2009, who knows exactly what he wants. They've got a defensive coordinator who's coached at Georgia, was a head coach at Charlotte, 1 or 2 other Power 5 schools in there as well. He's been at it for a long time. He's an older coach. They've got veteran coaches. They're 3 key positions: head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and the Hokies still seem to be kind of learning as they go with those 3 positions. So I'm going to pick Wake Forest to win a close one based on that.
What you David? You had Wake too?
I had Wake Forest too. Yeah, I think, again, Chris makes all the right points. And on top of that, it's one of those Virginia Tech has to show me. Like Andy said, Tech has to prove the coaching staff has to prove that it's right for the job still. But this team has to prove that it can win. Brent Price talked about we have to learn how to win. And he said that a lot last year. And Tech only has 2 wins this year. Looks like Tech's still trying to figure that out. And yeah, I think it'll be close. And I think Tech has a really good shot. As I wrote in the preview, I think if Bashal Tutin has more than 25-ish touches, I think Tech has a really good chance to win. He's the best player, as Andy and I talked about yesterday, on either side of the ball. He's Virginia Tech's best player. You got to get him the ball. You got to put it in his hands. And if you do, good things will happen. We saw that in special teams last week. I think Tech has a good chance to win. But until Tech shows it can win, I'm picking against them. So I got Wake, I think 23-21.
I think that was
That was yours, 23-21.
I am taking Virginia Tech in this one. You guys just opened the door in this pick'em. You're all taking a road dog in Lane Stadium. You gave me the home favorites. I don't even need to take the points. I just need to get them to win. I took Tech 23-20, which may be high scoring for this team, but went into that Pitt game, and I sort of picked Pitt just based on historical, how that game has gone. I go, this is what Pitt has always been, and Pitt was a shell of itself in that game. I don't know if Wake Forest is quite the team that has been in recent years, and maybe the way we've talked about them, it's like, well, Clawson gets it done. He knows what he's doing. I don't know if they got the quarterback this year to make that happen. Then Sam Hartman was such an integral piece to how good that team was over the years, and such a difference maker, especially in close games. I just don't know if they quite have the same team that they've had in recent years, some of the ones that have given the Hokies trouble. So 2 not good teams. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that Virginia Tech's so much better and should win this game. I mean, they have flaws on their side as well. for some reason, I like the Hokies in this one, coming off a tough week last week. And I think they played pretty well at home the last time they were here. I think if they're playing an offense that doesn't necessarily have, can beat you in a couple of ways, they've been okay against those teams. Certainly was against Pitt. They couldn't do anything offensively. So I'll give them a shot on this one, and I like the home favorite here.
So this is like a big swing game, because if you get this one right this week, I think you're back tied with David and I in predictions.
That's right.
But
I took a shot at Marshall,
you did. But if you lose it, you're 2 games back.
Scared money don't make money.
I think that's the perfect.
To quote the immortal Ryan Willis, to Aaron McFarlane, the perfect person to say that.
No
to.
doubt.
I think that's the perfect mic drop to end this thing on an awesome Thursday. Hey, we'll see you back here on Monday when we go ahead and talk about this whole thing. So, Chris, safe travels this weekend, fellas. Enjoy the game, and you enjoy the game as well. We'll see you on Monday. It was episode 319 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Wake Forest and Virginia Tech, 3:30 kick from Lane Stadium on Saturday.